It's Wednesday, July 8th, 2026. Oil prices going up again. You probably know why. Day 2 of Tyler Robinson's preliminary hearing and reflecting on Tricky Dick. Next on the AM Update. A tanker, at least 2 tankers from what I saw yesterday, were struck in the Strait of Hormuz as President Trump arrived in Turkey. There's now audio of the Iranians threatening ships in the strait. Here is what they had to say.
This is the last warning. This is last warning. This is last warning. You are running danger. Don't put your life in danger.
So after agreeing to not strike each other for a week, I think that was for the purpose of having Ayatollah Khamenei's funeral finally in Iran. And maybe they're just giving us, just a nice little break for Independence Day as well. Seems like the Iranians, the IRGC, up to their old tricks again. President Trump is officially revoking the U.S. license that allowed Iran to sell their oil after the mullahs, of course, struck those vessels as well. Oil prices creeping up yesterday as well. WTI crude up 5% on the day. Still in the low $70 a barrel, but still something to keep an eye on. When I saw that huge increase in price yesterday of crude oil, I'm like, what in the world have we gotten ourselves into yet again? As I said, President Trump arrived in Ankara, Turkey yesterday, and he was asked, of course, Turkey is a member of NATO. Are we calling it, by the way, we need a ruling on this. Are we calling it Turkey still or Turkey? I think in my house, we're still calling it Turkey. Asked about the ongoing relationship with various NATO members, here's what Trump had to say.
Are further troop drawdowns in Europe likely? And are you satisfied with the progress that NATO allies have made?
Well, we're going to see. I was very disappointed with NATO. And frankly, if it weren't held in Turkey, where my friend happens to be a very strong leader, a very strong person, it's possible that I wouldn't have attended. I felt I had to attend because of the fact that, I know he's gone all out. It was a big thing to have NATO come to Turkey or any place else. It's a big thing. But we weren't treated well because we did something in Iran. We don't need anybody's help. I didn't even want their help. But before I asked, they said they wouldn't be there. And we've invested trillions of dollars in NATO. Why? To protect European countries and others, Canada, etc., but to protect people, countries from, generally speaking, it used to be the Soviet Union, now it's Russia. And I say that's fine, but you would think that they'd be very willing to do something to help us.
President Trump, once again, very critical of other NATO members as he makes those comments in a NATO member's country of Turkey, saying, hey, we're still examining whether or not to draw down and maybe lessen our support of our NATO quote-unquote allies in Europe. President Trump also touting yesterday a big move that Toyota announced, dashing yet another one of my hopes of ever owning a Toyota Tacoma. Toyota Motor said it's investing $3.6 billion to move production of the Tacoma midsize pickup from Mexico to Texas. San Antonio plant currently produces Toyota Tundra full-size pickup trucks, including a hybrid variant and the Toyota Sequoia. The automaker said last year it plans to invest up to $10 billion more than previously expected by 2030 into the United States. The investment is expected to create 2,000 U.S. jobs at the facility, add a second vehicle assembly line, and roughly double the size of the 2.7 million square foot plant by 2030. I said this is dashing my hopes of ever owning a Tacoma because, of course, the idea is if it's going to be made in the United States, it'll be more expensive. My attitude is probably what got us into the predicament of offshoring so much of our manufacturing and industrial base. It's just too cheap to do it elsewhere. Let's just outsource everything. No, I'm glad for this move. And hopefully that does actually result in the creation of U.S. jobs, as the Toyota Tacoma is one of the hottest pickup trucks out there. Good news, to say the least. Scott Jennings, the CNN contributor and a Salem radio host, revealed yesterday he actually talked to Kentucky Senator Mitch McConnell. Quote, I spoke to my old friend Mitch McConnell this morning, the senior senator from Kentucky. He is still recovering in the hospital. We talked for just shy of 20 minutes about Iran, Ukraine, and the unfolding situation in Maine. That'd be the Graham Platner situation. More on that in a little bit. My visit to the TR Presidential Library and even a little bit of Senate history. I told him we want to see him back at work as soon as possible. So I guess Mitch McConnell is not brain dead, as some of the rumors out there this week have stipulated about. Day 2 of the Tyler Robinson preliminary hearing. One of the big revelations yesterday, and they actually did play some of this footage for the cameras in the courtroom. Robinson's alleged movements are being mapped by campus video showing the before, during, and after the shots were fired. Translation, this footage that they played in court yesterday, it shows Tyler Robinson on the scene of the crime, entering the scene of the crime, leaving the scene of the crime right during the actual commission of the crime, the heinous assassination of Charlie Kirk. First part of the video that they showed in court, to my eyes, looked pretty clear, plain as day. Shows Robinson pulling into a parking garage, getting out of his silver Dodge Challenger in the morning, and walking on campus, actually making contact with a TPUSA representative. The second time he comes to campus on foot later that morning, he stopped in to eat at Chick-fil-A and then left campus around 11 a.m. The third time he comes back to campus, he's also on foot, same way he scoped out the second time. The witness who was describing all of these movements noticed that he was walking with a limp, Tyler Robinson was, which is different from the other two videos. One of his legs does not bend to go up the stairs. It seems as though the limp is caused by hiding a rifle in a pants leg. Again, all that video was shown in court yesterday in the preliminary hearing. So that preliminary hearing rolls on this week in Utah. Graham Platner has another accuser. You probably heard of this. This woman who claims she dated Platner on and off for 2 years, culminating into 2021, with Platner basically breaking into her rural Maine house and forcing himself upon her, raping her. That's what she's describing. This woman, Jenny Racicot, talked to CNN's Jake Tapper and describes what went down with Graham Platner, Maine Senate Democrat candidate.
Let me be as direct as I can. Did Graham Platner rape you?
By definition, yes. Absolutely.
Because he had non-consensual sex with you?
Yeah.
Forced himself on you? Mm-hmm. Even after you had told him no and fought him off?
Yeah. He violated multiple layers of consent that night by coming into my home when I asked him not to, and by advancing on me when I told him not to. And furthermore, another incident that I had told him not to do. And
with protection.
Yeah. So, yeah. By the way that my nervous system reacted to this experience, absolutely.
Jenny Racicot, the accuser of Graham Platner, Democrat Senate candidate in Maine, just his latest in a long line of controversies and scandals. This latest one, which he has denied. Apparently, even New York City Islamist Mayor Zohran Mamdani has lines for quality of candidates. Here he is being asked about Platner yesterday.
Do you think that Graham Platner should drop out of the race? And do you have any intention of endorsing any candidates in competitive races outside of New York, El Said, or anyone else?
No, I believe that it's time for him to drop out of the race. And when it comes to my own endorsements, I've made 8 endorsements at the state and federal level. They've all been right here in New York City. I'm incredibly excited at the fact that they won their races, and that's where my focus is for now.
So Zohran Mamdani, quickly being foisted as the face of the National Democrat Party, could not wait to back out of that spotlight when it came to Graham Platner, saying, I think he should drop out, and I'm just a little old New York City mayor. Y'all can sort this out for yourselves. But apparently even he has some standards. When we come back, some news out of France, also some news out of China. And reflecting on Tricky Dick, that would be Richard Nixon. More in just a moment. The Paris Appeal Court has upheld Marine Le Pen's conviction for misusing EU funds, but has shortened her sentence, clearing the path for her to run in the April 2027 French presidential election. A 5-year ban on holding public office has been reduced and backdated to March of 2025, and the court said it now considered the penalty had already been served. However, the leader of the National Rally Party has been given a 1-year term wearing an electronic ankle tag under house arrest, although that would not necessarily stop her from running either. Le Pen has said repeatedly she would not run for president if she had to wear an electronic tag, as she would not feel totally free to campaign. She said in a TV appearance on Tuesday night, "Just kidding, I actually am running again." So this was, you'll recall this story, she was quickly gaining popularity. France's far right, for those of you listening, I'm using air quotes, France's far right party was gaining some steam in some local elections. And then all of a sudden, their leader, Marine Le Pen, well, she can't hold office for 5 years. Well, a Paris appeals court said, "Just kidding, yes, she can." She said, "If I have to wear an ankle monitor, I'm not running for president." Just kidding, I am actually running for president. So Marine Le Pen, leader of the right party in France, looking to run for president yet again. Back at home, a pastor of a prominent underground church who was detained in China in October has been released less than 2 months after U.S. President Donald Trump brought up his case when meeting Chinese leader Xi Jinping in Beijing. Pastor Ezra Jin Mingri arrived in Los Angeles and is, quote, finally reunited with his family. That's according to Francis Hui at the Committee for Freedom in Hong Kong Foundation in a post on X. He and 17 other leaders of the underground Zion Church were detained in October in one of China's largest crackdowns on a single church in decades, raising worries over an escalation in the government's curtailing of religious freedom. Family statement said Jin's release happened very quickly, thanking President Trump, and said they know the release could not have happened without Xi's direct intervention. So that is good news. A captive of Chinese Communist Party, a pastor of the underground church there in China. He is back in the United States and free. Let's go to this. This caught my eye recently. Vice President J.D. Vance, speaking at the Richard Nixon Foundation, had these comments about some of the, a little bit in his words, renaissance that Tricky Dick is undergoing in recent years.
So we were talking about this a little bit backstage, but I'm actually fascinated by Nixon as a character in history. I think that his historical legacy is enjoying a bit of a renaissance, but I think deservedly so. As I joked with Robert backstage, if Watergate happened tomorrow, it would be like a 12-hour news story. Like, the idea that it would have taken down a presidency is crazy. And by the way, if you look at the story of how the deep state took down Richard Nixon, it's not all that different from what the same groups of people, the same institutions tried to do to Donald Trump in the first Trump administration. There is a parallel. I also just, at a personal level, young senator, vice president, writes some best-selling books, is hated by the media. It kind of sounds like J.D. Vance. So I'm a little, I've always liked Richard Nixon. But okay,
so there's J.D. Vance making a couple of comments there. Richard Nixon's legacy, life presidency, kind of going through a renaissance, and he pinpoints exactly why that's the case, because if you actually study the period, especially of Watergate, there are so many parallels, so many echoes at the very least, I think any honest observer would say, about what some of the early beginnings, or maybe even at that time, the big manifestations of the swamp, what they did to somebody who perceived, real or imagined, perceived as a threat to the status quo in D.C. So there are a lot of parallels there. But there's also an interesting comment that he made. If Watergate happened today, it would be like a 12-hour cycle in media. I know that's an exaggeration. I don't think that's too much of an exaggeration either, which is another reason why I'm trying to check myself. Am I more interested in Nixon just because, by comparison, what happened then ain't got nothing on basically a daily news cycle now? In other words, is the news that we are accustomed to on a day in and day out basis, basically like the junkie who has to keep taking more of the same drug in order to achieve the same high, and you're just such a junkie and degenerate. That's kind of what it feels like. And I'm not saying if you're consuming the news, you're a drug junkie, although I think there can be an addiction to or at least an unhealthy obsession with the news, for sure. But that's kind of the other parallel or the kind of the other message that I get from that. And I've thought about that often as well. I just want to repeat something that I've said often. I just don't think human beings are built, designed physiologically to imbibe as much information as we are accustomed to in the 21st century, in the age of social media, the age of doom scrolling. And so I do think J.D. Vance, he might have thought he was exaggerating there about Watergate being a 12-hour news cycle, but I don't think it's too far out of the realm of possibility either. Which is difficult to say because that was such a momentous time in that period of American history. The scandal, the Watergate, everything is a gate since then. But I think part of the renaissance that Richard Nixon is enjoying is because, by comparison, it just doesn't seem like that big of a deal. Is that right or wrong? I think it's probably a little bit of both. There's definitely some untoward business in Watergate for sure. But was it part of a larger scheme to undo the will of the people through a vessel that posed a serious risk to the swamp at that time? I think that's probably more, that's at least 51% what it was, more than anything. A lot of parallels there. That's going to do it for a Wednesday. Hope you have a good one. Back at it again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntire, and this is the AM Update.